It was titled, okay, got it. It was titled Four Critical Moments in Action, but I managed to find a fifth one at the end. So, what I'm trying to present here is what the work that we've done in the Transdisciplinary Action Lab in autumn, and then in the reframing, remixing subject um, in July. So we had 350 students in each subject. And we also developed a research based on it. So we got to capture the reflection of the students on the use of AI. And so what we've seen here, what you're going to see here is how GenAI has been used as a teaching and learning partner for more human interactions. And that's one of the early findings that we find is that the more we've been using AI, the more we've been able to have more human interaction. So I hope this will trigger a question from you guys as we go. I'm going to try to make this as interactive as possible to get you to use the tools on your own, and you'll still be able to use those tools afterwards. So this is the overall pictures of the five moments. Honestly, I will be able to do a presentation on each of them. But so I'm gonna go as quick as possible just to give you a taste for each of them. But happy for you to stop me if you have more questions, and I might be presenting further on each of those different steps. So I'm going to start with the enabler, which is the dedicated subject learning outcome. Like when we were designing this subject, we were developing activities with GenAI, we were developing interaction with GenAI, and it felt like we were stuck because if we didn't have a subject learning outcome that involved GenAI, we would not have been able to assess the student properly. So I think that's something that we need to keep in mind. So I removed one of the SLO and came up with this one. And the keyword that we put in there was evaluative judgment, ethical consideration, and reflexive approach in leveraging AI-driven tool. And that really allows us to justify all our activities that I'm going to show you now. So the first moment that we introduced GenAI to the students was in the first tutorial. And I think that was setting the rhythm for them. We did an in-class discussion on Miro about how they felt about having AI in the classroom activities and assessment, what are their risk and concern around ethics, around access. And also, if you can see at the top, what was the literacy around GenAI tools. So it was very interesting to see across 350 students that some of them didn't use it at all before, some of them were experts. Again, our students are from all the faculties at UTS, so we have students who actually study GenAI, and then we have students in communication law who maybe haven't used GenAI. And then we introduce them to something that a PhD at the Transdisciplinary School has been developing, which is a personal AI tutor. And you can take your phone and register for that AI tutor with the QR code while I go on the canvas and show you what this is. There we go. So on Canvas, we introduce them to Alice AI. So Alice AI is basically, it's a GenAI tool that was trained on the content from Canvas for this subject. So it allows all the students to query the platform about anything about the subject. And then when it goes beyond the boundaries of the subject, then it's got access to the general LLM content. This is not new. Like I've got articles from Oxford School who's been doing the same as well. So it's something that we wanted to try. And we invited students to then ask questions to start learning about the school. And so I'll also put the link in case if you want to if you want to join with your computer instead of your phone, but I really advise to do it with the computer, with the phone, sorry. Where's my chat? It disappeared. I put the link here. Cool. All right. Okay. Can you still see my screen that says Alice AI? Yes, cool. So when you sign up, it's important to choose the subject, which is TAL 95008, because as I said, it's been trained on different content. So you should have access to TAL 95008, which is the subject. And from here, so the students can then interact with the content on Canvas in their own language and get responses in a more familiar language. So I could be asking, what do I need to do in assessment 1? And so here, the tool goes and select the right GenAI tool. So it could be using ChatGPT 5, Claude, Microsoft Copilot. So it selects the tool that is the most relevant and then pass the Canvas data through it. So it takes about 20 seconds. So that's something we have to explain to the students to wait a bit while it generates the information. But there it is, like it provides the way, the due date, the word count, the learning objective, how to approach the task. So here we had learning activities or like portfolio activities if you want. 4 of them, the word count for each of them. And it explained what was the source, which was the assessment brief. You could be asking, what is the link to the mirror board, which is what we work a lot with them. And that should, if you post that in Canvas, then it should be able to find it. But so for them, it was a way to have access to some of the best GenAI tool without paying for it. So Copilot, ChatGPT version 5. So it kind of gave a equity of access to the students. There you go. Like it provided the link. Cool. So I go back to, so this was the first step, just to introduce them to a GenAI tool that we will be using for the subject. And so their feedback in their own reflection that we captured was they used it as a way to clarify the task and support the understanding. So you help them to better understanding the assessments, that clarification. It really helped them ask the stupid question that they didn't dare asking the subject coordinator or their tutors. And also it stopped them from like trying to search into all the pages in Canvas. For them, it also enhanced clarity and productivity, because then they could also check that their assessment was following the different subject, the different SLOs and the different marking criteria as well, which was important. Some of them in the cons didn't get the chance to use LECRS because they had a hard time to create an account. So that's why I wanted you to have access, to try to create an access to see how hard or how easy it was to get access to it. Any questions so far? Has anybody been able to access the tool and been trying to ask some questions
Yes, I
themselves?
did, and I found it very useful.
Cool. Excellent.
I enrolled into your TD subject and asked it
Perfect.
to tell me what the assignments are,
Perfect. That's it. That's exactly
which is a
it.
question they ask all the
It's the number one question. When it is due, what is it about? And I mean, we can go even further, like ask them what type of ideas we could use from it. So Leandra could not find my subject. Yeah, it's 95008. Just make sure you sign up with your UTS email account, because it's restricted for UTS staff and students. Otherwise, Alejandra, you can also try to enroll in RRS, which is a second subject that we run in July, and use the same type of questions.
Yeah, Julien, I can't find the 95008 either. I can only find the RRS.
Yeah, so pick the RRS. It's just because I run that one as well, so I know the data is there. So from the tutors, so we had 6 tutors in autumn and 12 tutors in July. So they talk about the equity of access to a GenAI tool, which I was mentioning before. They also found that there was less questions that were linked to assessment, a type of assessment question related, because the tool was available 24/7. We got some stats that were crazy. We got 2,000 queries the week before assessment one and two were released at 3 a.m., 2 a.m. in the morning. That's when they were asking the question, which was interesting. They also realized that all the Canvas content was searchable in a different language. You could interact it by questioning it, but you can also have a conversation. You can use it as with a microphone on your phone, which I'll make a demonstration of it. It was also useful for the tutors because having 12 tutors at the same time, you want a consistency of delivery. And so tutors were also able to ask questions about what is the assessment, when it is due, all those questions that they will be asking you if that's the first time delivering the subject. So that was really helpful. But one of the content that you really need to onboard the tutors early on, so in your briefing sessions, so then they can then onboard the students themselves. This is the one I was talking about. Oh, yeah, Harvard Business School run the same thing. They have a AI tutor bot. So same functionality. There's a lot of research. They did a lot of research about it. They were able to access all the data, and that was really interesting. I've got another presentation on that. So the second moment that we got the students to interact with GenAI. So we had that first moment when they could access all the content of Canvas and then discuss the pros and cons of using GenAI in assessment and activity. We got them to do a part of their assessment, so the desk research with GenAI. So we basically told them to, I'll just go on the Canvas so you can see it. We asked them so they had a challenge on new ways of working. What are the new ways of working that you could provide to the new generation of workers? So students from all different disciplines, new ways of working, not necessarily the type of information they knew. So we asked them, okay, just go and explore the current workplace debates using AI, and we told them to use ChatGPT or Copilot. We gave them some prompts to start using the tool because not everyone knew how to use it, and kind of find do a proper research, try to find the areas that are interesting to go further on. And so that part went really well. But the most important part was actually evaluate the research leads. We basically asked them to evaluate the results that they got from ChatGPT. We asked them to cross-reference with academic sources, to cross-reference with industry reports and case studies. We asked them to spot the bias and to look at all the mistakes and inaccuracies, and then do a synthesis. And so that got very interesting because at first they thought, cool, we just do our assessment with GenAI and then we submit and then it's done. But then when they did the analysis evaluation, their feedback was in bold that they realized themselves that GenAI provides generic results. So it was really good for them to realize the limitation of the tool. So the quote was, "These analyses and the responses generated by both applications were quite generic and lacked authenticity." They also had ethical concerns. So the team said they had enormous ethical concern about GenAI, so they went for a more, how do they call it, more traditional collaboration style. So it was really good to get them exposed to the tool, and they thought that was it. They'd done the assessment, and when they did the evaluation, which they couldn't really do with GenAI, then that's when they realized the limitation of the tool. So then we went to the third moment of interaction with GenAI, and that's where we have more human interaction. When we run in autumn, we realized a lot of the students did their work on ChatGPT, which we asked them to do, and then they submitted, and then we couldn't see the evaluation, the part that we were really interested in. They just thought they'd just submit the ChatGPT part. So what we did in July is they still did the same activities, they submitted, and then they got marked by coming to class, sitting with the tutor outside the classroom. They had 20 minutes dedicated with each tutor for their team. So they sat as a team, and the tutor, and we got Sean in a room right there, who can provide some feedback if he wants to, ask question to each student to see what they learned from their desk research with ChatGPT. And we marked them. We didn't mark what they submitted. We marked the conversation we had with them. They had to prove us that they didn't do a cognitive offloading, which is just, like copy paste the ChatGPT and put it into Canvas, but they actually remember something. They learn something about it. So semi-structured questions. We run it face-to-face because it was an intensive, and we plan on running it online next year. And we marked, which was really important, we marked as complete incomplete. So there was less stress from the students. And it was 4 tasks, and each of them was 10%. And so for the teachers, for our tutors, they really enjoy the human interaction. They got to build a rapport with each teams and each team members, like for learning their names from day one, for instance. They saw an active listening from the students because they were working together as a group, and they had to understand what type of research was done by all the group members. The teacher liked the quick marking turnaround as well, which was really useful when you do intensive subjects, because they didn't have to read the entire document. They only had to mark the way the students were answering the question. There was a sense of accountability because they were all the team members were around the table and had to answer questions. For all the subject coordinator out there, I didn't have extra budget to do this, so I used some of my marking budget and sort of my mentoring budget to pay for that. So we kind of moved that marking where, I had frustrated tutors that said, "Oh, this has been writing with GenAI," and they at home marking, and it's a frustration, and they provide feedback. Not sure the student's going to read it. To being face to face with the students, have a conversation, and being able to give them verbal feedback on the work they've done. Sean, did you want to add anything as one of the tutors that went through that experience?
I hope you can see me. You're putting me on the spot, are you?
Yeah.
Okay. Can I say, I suppose one of the things that came out for me was that quick connection with students, able to interact with them quickly, but also learn their names as well. And I think for the first time, students were commenting during the subject like, "Wow, this is the first time a tutor in my degree or at the university has looked at me and recognized me and called me by my name." So, we were finding just these changes in processes with how we're interacting with students, and what Julian's been noting as well, just brings out a whole different dynamic. And I think the tutors as well as the students together had a great time in the subject, but just learning from each other, and I think much more deeply and authentically than we could have achieved otherwise.
Thank you, Sean. There's a fourth moment of connection with GenAI. That was another part of their assessment, was to do primary research. So it was to do interviews. So what we asked them to do was to do synthetic users interviews. So basically asking them to use any GenAI tool they wanted, but Alice AI if they wanted, which is the one that we gave them, and use the phone, use the microphone version, and then tell the GenAI tool to pretend to be one of the stakeholders they wanted to interview, and conduct the interview. And I'm going to give an example with Dean, who did develop GenAI, Alice AI.
Hello there. How can I assist you today?
Is the audio coming through? Yes, perfect.
Hi, I want to conduct a role-play interview with you. Your name is Samantha. You're a Gen Z employee. at a consulting firm, and I want to interview you about your work practice.
Awesome. I'm ready.
So
Go ahead and
yeah, sorry. So tell me about some of the tools that you use as part of work, and be specific about the tools that you use.
Sure. As a Gen Z employee at a consulting firm, I use a variety of tools to stay productive and connected. For project management, I often rely on platforms like Asana or Trello to organize tasks and deadlines. Communication is key, so I use Slack and Microsoft Teams for quick chats and video calls with colleagues and clients. For data analysis, I might use Excel or Tableau to analyze data and create visualizations. For communication, I rely on tools like Slack, Microsoft Teams, and Zoom for team collaboration and meetings. I also use it seems like I was rambling on. Would you like me to continue talking about the tools I use at work?
Oh, all good, all good. So what are some of the pain points that you experience at work as part of everyday kind of work practice?
One pain point is the constant shift in priorities, which can make it hard to focus. Additionally, balancing the expectations of different clients can be challenging. There's also the pressure to stay constantly updated with industry trends, which can be overwhelming at times.
And tell me about like working with different generations at work. Is that an issue? What are some of the kind of issues or concerns around that?
Working with different generations can be both enriching and challenging. Sometimes there's a difference in communication styles or expectations around work flexibility. For instance, Gen Z might prioritize digital communication and work-life balance, while other generations might value face-to-face meetings more. But overall, it's about finding common ground and learning from each other.
Great, thanks very much. Really appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
All right, so that was for the demo. Obviously, we want them to run the interview for longer. So that's what they had to do. And here's the feedback that the student provided us in their reflection. We used ChatGPT and Alice AI to brainstorm ideas, create interviews, question, and conduct the interviews. And some AI answers lacked empathy and human tone. Like, what a surprise! But it was great for them to realize that. Another student said in Sprint 4, which is the portfolio activity that we run, interviews were generated synthetically using AI tools to critically evaluate the interview compared to real-world interviews. It appeared realistic, which surprised me a lot. So some of them found the synthetic users interview realistic. A huge comment that we got was the lack of depth and nuance. In the first few sprints, we used ChatGPT and Alice AI to generate synthetic interview responses, which created false confidence. Once we began speaking with real stakeholders, we saw how much depth and nuance had been missing. Because this is what we did. We got them to interview synthetic users, and then we got them to interview real people on the street. And so we learned a lot from that. So what we learn is we've decided for next year, to run the synthetic users interview first. So for them to be able to focus on developing the type of questions they would like to ask the stakeholders, the ways that stakeholders are answering those questions. Then move to have one of those marked oral review with their mentors, with their tutors, so they can share what they've been, what worked, what didn't work with the question they had, and then go and have the real interviews on the streets. And we find through what we've done and through further research that it does help the students to build self-confidence if they do the synthetic user reviews and the oral reviews beforehand, because they've tried the question, they know the questions are going to work, and so they can focus on interaction with a human. And that's where we found that we used to teach them in the classroom, like what type of question they should be using in interviews, open-ended question, like follow-up questions. And we realized, well, they can do that in the synthetic users interviews and with the content in Canvas. What we got was to spend more time on the human aspect of the interviews. How do you stop a person on the street? How do you start smiling? How do you engage in the conversation? How to be more human in the interview? And we also found that some students, majority of students are really scared of doing street interviews, but then they're really happy once they've done it. Like, there's a feeling of overcoming it. But we realize for some students, it's still, for the introverts, for some neurodivergent students, whatever, the real life interviews are just too hard. So at least having them to do synthetic users interviews is a way to do the activities somewhat to participate. So that was useful for that. So the review from the students about the other activity was to compare the synthetic users interview with the real world interviews. We wanted them to compare them. And they realized they needed the real critical human-centered inquiry. I'm going to read the quote here. I critically evaluated the outputs of an interview with the synthetic users and compared it to the real-world interview previously conducted. My findings fell short of the personal touch found in real-world interviews. Real participants shared personal struggles and challenges which were largely absent in AI-generated responses, even though the same questions were asked. So it was good for them to find the limits of the GenAI tools, at least in 2025. And so some students came up with a good approach, which is using triangulation to offset AI deficiencies. So they use the synthetic users interviews, the real life interviews, and peer review studies and academic research, just to have like a more comprehensive approach. So that was a voice from students. Yeah. Any questions on synthetic users interviews and real life interviews? Oh, I saw a question. Sorry, question from Shankar. Could also help students who are not working in an organization to do the assignment with virtual managers and so. Yes, correct. It was some of the students were telling us on the street they couldn't find the stakeholders that they were really interested in interviewing. And so this is a good way to still get some answers if they don't find the right stakeholders. So here, if they're not working in an organization, to find the right stakeholders such as managers.
Yeah, it's better than them going to some website and downloading secondary data and trying to do an assignment.
Yes.
This is a much more realistic way. And I think I have a lot of students who come from international students who do not have jobs and often find it difficult to relate it to an organization.
Exactly.
But they still can do where they worked before or something, but at least the interviews provide some good data. Yeah.
Exactly. They really get they get a feel for the interview, for the activities. It's funny that you mentioned international students, because we had international students who didn't feel confident to do the interview in English, so they did the interview in Mandarin in the GenAI tool, and then we also told them on the street to do the interview in Mandarin as well. So they were able to do the activity in their language and then translate back to English. We also, in the past, we had a lot of students when we used to do interviews not on the street, they'll simply interview mom and dad, which was, it's not the same level of challenge. So it gives them another tool.
Julien, I'm just curious because yes, it's great to build confidence in the students by giving them this opportunity, but the danger could be that when they go to do the real thing, they are too scared, or they lack time, and they can't be bothered actually sourcing real people to interview, especially if it is a serious research project that they're working on and they have to produce real recommendations to a client, for example. What can you say to that?
I agree. This is a risk, and so that's why we swapped to doing street interviews with the students. So basically, the tutor. So first, we spend an hour in the tutorial. So we run 3-hour tutorial. So we run an hour in a tutorial where we role play the human interaction. So, you know, showing them that you've got a UTS student ID, doing the verbal consent, so stopping them not in the content, but in the form of running the interview. So that's where they got that self-confidence, because they didn't have to focus so much on the question. They just have to focus on the delivery, and the tutors were giving them feedback in the classroom. Then the tutors take the entire class, so the 30 students, and walk outside the building with them and go to, so we had some students using business, the business school classroom. So they went to the square over that, Darling Square. We had students going to Railway Square, some going to Broadway. But the tutor was there, and the students had to come back to the tutors to debrief on how many interviews they were currently doing, who they managed to interview. So there was accountability as well, because they could see all the other students also trying to interview people, so they were trying to motivate each other. They were doing in pairs as well, which was really important to give them that confidence that they could do it. So the pros is they actually do interview real people and not their parents. The cons is they really wanted to find that you know, that banking manager in his 50s. Well, if actually in Darling Square, you could find that person because you got Commonwealth Bank right there. And so you could just stand outside the building. But if you're in Broadway, we're not going to find that person. So pros and cons, but for us, it was more important for us to get them to interview real people. But I agree, if you send them to do it as a homework when they're home, and they've got the opportunity to just use the synthetic user interviews, and it's going to be a temptation to use a shortcut. Am I running on time? Cool. All right. And the final moment, I think, which is critical, is we got them to reflect on their use of GenAI. So that's part of the third and final assessment. They had to reflect on all the tools about transdisciplinary that they use, the entrepreneurship mindset, and then their use of GenAI. And so we got an ethic application that allows to capture that section of the reflection. And out of 350 students, we got 74 that allowed us to do that. So that's what all the quote that you saw in the presentation came from that reflection, which is part of an assessment. So, you know, there's a bit of that bias. We need to keep them in mind. But so if the early findings of our research that we're conducting with Sean is students learn that GenAI is a powerful accelerator for learning, but not a substitute for it. And some of the quote that we used for that was, it made us feel confident early on, but when we spoke to real stakeholders, we saw how much depth and nuance had been missing. GenAI helped structure our ideas, but without our own reasoning, the answer was shallow. So it's really getting them to understand that, yes, there's a tool, but it doesn't replace their thinking. It really supports them, like it's a partner in the learning, but not a replacement. So second point, they learn to treat GenAI as a partner in critical thinking, a source to interrogate, but not to imitate. And the quote was, AI interviews were useful for comparison, but we knew they couldn't replace authentic voices. And I think it's a win if we get them to use a tool, to see the limitation, and to realize, well, the human interaction is still critical. I think that's a win for higher education. And I really like the third point. GenAI changed how they collaborate and create. So one of the quotes is, it was a great brainstorming partner, but he lacked emotional understanding. Working with GenAI made us more open-minded and reflective about how ideas evolved. So this is early days for the research, and we just got some funding, so it's great. We're gonna have a couple of RAs working on doing a more thorough thematic analysis, and hopefully get more information. But it's been fantastic to see how students learn from their use of GenAI. Now it's time for questions. I'll be happy to get all your questions. I'm going to chat.
So, Julien, there are no questions in the chat, but perhaps if we turn that's it.
Yeah, Shankar, go ahead.
One of the things we are very cautious about using GenAI for assessments. So when I've done 3 times this experiment with GenAI, and the first time I had to get ethics approval from a university, even though it was self-reflection. Did you have to get ethics approval to do this?
No, we run it we run it as an experiment. What we had to make sure was the tool that was developed, so Alice AI. It was also an experiment. We had to make sure that the data was stayed in Australia, was hosted in Australia, and now our PhD students is going through the process of having the tool being approved to be used across UTS. But in terms of using ChatGPT or other GenAI part of the assessment, no, we didn't have any ethics for it. We did follow the I did share with the students how we use GenAI IUTS.
Okay.
So we did share that. So it was early in February, so there was already a framework that had been designed, but not further than that. And obviously, in each of the assessment, they had to declare that they were using GenAI as well.
Yeah, because the equity issue comes up. So
yeah,
we were asked by
So the equity,
because we're not teaching GenAI, we're teaching some other subject, but asking them to use, and not all of them use GenAI. But nowadays, everybody uses GenAI. So
I had a few. No, but you're right. Like, because I had a few students who refused to use GenAI for the activity. And so,
I had that too. Yeah,
you had that too. So my answer on the spot was, well, look, when I first started, well, for the desk research, it's like, well, okay, well, you do use desk research as you usually do desk research, that's fine. Which was possible in the 12-week format, but when we run an intensive every day and you have to do the desk research for the next day, it became challenging for them. Yeah. What did you do when they said no, we don't?
No, we allowed them to do a presentation in which they can use GenAI, but the marking criteria for the presentation did not say anything about how we evaluate. We told them that we're not evaluating you on GenAI, but they were reluctant to do it. But then in a future, the next assignment, we asked them to write 200 words on how, if they use GenAI and what they use. And they gave us a lot of interesting ways in which they used it other than writing the assignment itself.
Brainstorming.
But I think one of the most successful ones I had was I asked them to, I read the book by the Wharton professor who are living and I gave them 4 scenarios that might occur. And it was teaching leadership. So I asked them to think about the 4 scenarios, which was from the book. I took the scenarios, gave it to them. And I told them that you are doing scenario planning, but you don't have experts in the room. GenAI is your expert.
Is your expert.
So you use GenAI as an expert to get what the future scenarios will be. Then I asked, because they did it in teams, then I asked one team to question the other. So that was a critical assessment and that particular activity went extremely well because everybody got engaged. But we only gave them marks for what they did on the assignment rather than, but the assignment was supposed to be the time was about 45 minutes. The class went on until another 45 minutes because people are energized. So I think getting them to use GenAI and debate using that, like the interviews, that is a much more better way I found. I had also used it, read 3 articles and use GenAI and you summarize and find the differences. That worked all right, but I think getting them to do some activity in which they had used GenAI worked extremely well for me.
Yeah, and I think because all those activities were related to the assessments, like that was
that's right.
Portfolio of the assessment. Then that's why for us it was important to to change the subject learning outcome and to have one
Yeah.
related to GenAI, to the evaluative judgment, the
Yeah.
ethical consideration. So this way we could have marking criteria that were linked
Yeah.
to the use. And for me, the most like the obvious one was the desk research. There was barely any point on the content of the desk research.
Right.
The most time where we spent our evaluation was how did they cross-reference what came out of ChatGPT? You know, the bias, the mistakes, how did they find references, not hallucination, and then they realized that's where the work was for them, like to challenge, to evaluate what came out of ChatGPT.
So I have done this, used GenAI 3 times over the last 2 years. The first time I did it with somebody else, second time I did it by myself. And the third time I asked my tutors to also think about how they will use GenAI for their group work. We don't have tutors because we do it, they are casual lecturers who work within the workshop. And I was trying to figure out how different academics will use GenAI, and I've got some very interesting results of that. I'm trying to write a paper of like an action research paper on my engagement with GenAI. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you realize it's also how do you get your tutors on board on using
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Because they have some better ideas than me. Because they actually work in the industry and they know how GenAI is used by project managers because I teach project management.
Yeah, no, it was it's only the beginning, like because the tutors next year is going to be more used to use to GenAI. I hope tools such as Alicia will be a common things as well. It feels like it. Like that aspect of being able to talk to your phone and to ask questions about the content in Canvas is just amazing, because we spend so much time putting content in Canvas, and then students whose only way of consuming Canvas is to read, those ones will get the content, but the one that are more audio, for instance, they don't engage with that content. So now they can have the conversation, can have access to the content. That is really, really useful. And we didn't have the ethics to look under the hood and like go into the details of the data of how they've been using it. But some of the thing that was really useful is one thing that we could do was every week I had a top 3 questions that were asked by the students on the tool. And so obviously at assessment time, it was question about assessment, but sometimes it was something that wasn't clear in Canvas, and like a lot of students were asking it. So then I was able to do my lecture, my plenary, and to address those points. So it was kind of keeping a pulse on your students. And so the students who didn't have a chance to engage with the tool or didn't ask that question yet, but you knew that it wasn't clear enough for them because a lot of students had been asking the tool, you were able to answer those questions before they even think about it. That was really useful. And so now I have a review of week by week. What are the type of question they have? And so now I go back in Canvas and addressing those questions beforehand. So that was super useful.
So Julien, can you just repeat that? You mean that you have access to what students are asking within Alice AI?
Yes. So we couldn't do further research. So we did at a mass level. We just anonymize all the questions, and we're just able to quantify and do like rating the top 3 questions. That's we couldn't go further in, but what is interesting, I did have an article where they actually studied all the questions on their use of it. Let's share the where is it? That was the Oxford research.
I'm just wondering what level of access you have as a subject coordinator to the back end and what students are asking, and therefore what they're told, and are there mixed messages told in terms of what's in the assessment, or is it pretty accurate?
Okay, no, that's a good question. So I'm just going to share the paper. So that's from the Harvard Business Review, where they studied all the analytics behind the tool. But from what you said, so for the assessment, the way I double check it, I knew the data was coming from Canvas, so that was all my assessment brief. But what was interesting is I'll share my quick. I'll still get questions in my inbox, and I will simply test the tool. So I will take the question from the student and then dump it into LECI, such as what is Sprint 3 about, which is one of the activities, and I will double check that the answer was relevant. So that's how the first time around I was checking the validity is I will run the question from the students and then copy paste most of the response when they were good and then email them back to my students. So here the Sprint 3 was about stakeholder interview preparation. So they had to identify the stakeholders. So I will read through it. I'm like, yep, that's about right. That's right. Yep, they had to use a stakeholder constellation diagram that they did in class. Drive the interview. Yep, 3 open interview questions for each. So, and they'll give the word count. So so he gives a source. So I knew it was the right source, especially the version because I had to check the version. And then I started to do something cheeky as well. Every time I will answer the question by email, I will also add in the signature. You can also, for more questions, you can ask LECI. So trying to build a habit for them to ask LECI first before they start asking me or the tutors. But going forward, I'd like to get the ethics where we can really dig deeper into the use of the tool from the students, letting the students know that we'll be using that data as well, in order to identify where there's an opportunity for improvement for the learning, like what data is missing, what information is missing in Canvas.
Yeah. And you said it's a free tool.
So at the moment it's free because we were doing experiments. So our PhD student, Dean Hargrave, that you saw on a recording, was testing it. So I was paying him as a tutor, and so there was a few hours that were used for setting up the tool. So basically, what he had to do, for instance, he had to take the content from each page in Canvas and put it in the tool, right? Which is now it's something that is developing an API where it will connect directly, like he's talking with the IT department. IUT has to do that, but that's how I've been paying for it. Is more the time of setup than the use of the tool. I don't know what he's going to be proposing for that tool specifically for LECI, like if he's going to be charging by like a license by students or by subject or whatever. But I can see this type of tool becoming like a common tool for us to use in the coming years.
It was my understanding that there was already a tool developed by Simon and his team at KIC. Is that true? And
Yes.
how does it differ from this one?
So I used it at the time when I used it because I wanted to test both. It was, if Dean was there, we will be able to tell the difference. But it was more generic. Like it was not using all the content of Canvas. So it wasn't. I don't know if you've used it for instance, you can use the same tool like Simon's tool for digging information about policies at UTS. And you'll see that it was still too generic, and for me it didn't work to be that generic. So I really needed the content to be from Canvas and to limit at Canvas first and then go to the web. But I haven't used. I should try to use again the tool to see how it has evolved and to see it. Simon's is one of Dean's supervisor and is aware of that tool as well. So Dean is working with them.
Could I ask Julien, could you comment on the university's push towards cost savings and so forth? What would have the benefits been in relation to your workload as a tutor and subject coordinator, and how has it allowed you to redirect your own time and resources to other tasks?
For me, in terms of, if you just talk in terms of cost, that's been the time that I spent on emails. So 350 students, we're moving to 600 students next year. Usually they will email the tutors, but they always end up emailing us. So for the content, I keep pushing back to use a tool, so that really decrease the number of email. We still had questions about attendance that the tool will not fix, obviously. But that for me, it was really the time, because as you know, emails just, you disconnect from your work, you answer the email, and you go back into your work. Like it takes about 10 minutes maybe to answer the emails, but like it takes 20 minutes of your focus time really to do that. So that's something we've been trying to track. But for me, there's also a big save in the tutors asking you a question, or training your tutors about the content, or the tutors optimizing their preparation, because every time they had a doubt about what they had to deliver, they could ask. Oh, I forgot to say, for the tutors, there was an upgrade version where we put all the lesson plans as well in LECI. So when they were asking, how do I deliver a crazy 8 activity, which is an ideation activity, they will simply ask the question in the tool, and then the lesson plans will pop up, and the GenAI tool will explain how to run the activity. So that consistency of information across the tutors also saved me as a subject coordinator on time to train my tutors, focus more again on the human interaction than the actual content. And yeah, those was a bigger thing. And also, for the marking, when we get the students to use GenAI tool to do the activity, to do the part of the assessment, but then we use the tutors to mark orally, we didn't save on the cost of marking, but I just moved the marking from written marking to verbal marking. There was still a bit of handwritten marking, because at the end of the portfolio, so they submitted each part and did an overview for each part, but then I also asked them to do an executive summary where they had to reference all the submission and explain them, like the main quote, the main statistic. And that was a 500-word executive summary that was marked like regularly by the tutors, but took less time to mark, obviously. That's in terms of saving here. That's it. Yeah.
There's a question from Shankar about how do we use Alice AI in Canvas?
Well, that's where so Dean is. So actually, I'm going to use Dean's email because I keep asking him how is he progressing on making the tool accessible to everyone, like to be an official UTS provider. Contact. Oh, there he is. Everyone. So that's his email address. But yeah, I mean, using this tool will be, like Alicia will be fantastic because we know how to use it. But
yeah,
in any case, a tool like this will be coming up. Like Simon has a version already available as well. I mean, it will become something that we will like universities will be working with. For me, it's going to be hard in autumn if I don't have Alicia. Like,
no, that's fine. Thank you.
I think it's also important for equity purposes because we gave them LECI, which had access to the latest version of ChatGPT, had access to Copilot as well. So there was, and that was a paid version of all those tools. So there was an equity aspect of accessing a tool without the students having to pay for it. And because we've seen research where there's a disadvantage of wealthy students versus not as wealthy students who cannot pay for the subscription. So I think for us to provide, I mean, UTS provide Copilot, but we have a limited amount of licenses that we can provide to the students for Copilot. Whereas in this tool, they had access to, everyone had access to the paid version.
Yeah.
Cool. Any last minute questions?
Julien, I'd just like to make a comment. Shankar, you talked about how we are disciplinary teachers and not teaching about GenAI, but I'd like to just acknowledge that TEXA has indicated that we need to be both, that we need to teach students how to use AI usefully in a world enabled with generative AI, which puts us in a difficult position with those students who have an ethical issue around the use of GenAI. And I think actually hooks us to a train that we're not really sure where it's going. But it's something we do need to talk to our students about. And yeah, I think, thank you.
The problem paradox we are facing is that I teach project management, and the project management world is saying to all the project managers, go and use GenAI to improve your productivity.
Yeah.
And here we are teaching project management to students, and we say, no, we can't use that. And it's the paradox we are facing. How do we actually meet the industry needs versus what the university regulations allow us to do? So this is the area we are working in.
I think one of the points Julien made very early on is about evaluative judgment and critical thinking. And those two things are so important. They've always been very important. We've always should have been teaching those, but this has kind of really shone a light on the importance of that. So I'd like to thank you, Julien, for offering that. We've come to the end of our session. I'd like to thank Julien very much, heartfelt, for such an interesting talk. We've recorded it, so this is a resource that we can access earlier, at another date and listen to again. And thank you all for your time and attention.
And next week, my colleague Louis will be presenting, and he's working with the AI governance committee, and he's also been using Alicia as well, so he'll be able to provide even more information. So I suggest you attend the next GenAI showcase next week.
Thanks, Julien. Thank you. Thank you all.
See you, everyone. Bye-bye.